I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
Prince William has allegedly cut off Camilla's family funds following a shocking revelation from her ex-husband. Whispers inside royal circles claim the decision stems from a bombshell accusation that threatens to shake the monarchy's fragile unity. But as speculation spreads and public outrage builds online, questions arise about what was really said behind closed doors. Is this a royal power move or a hidden family war? So, what do you think this really means behind palace walls, and who is truly pulling the strings? Share your thoughts in comments, like, and subscribe for more updates. A quiet shift behind palace finance. The moment Prince William took control of the Duchy of Cornwall in September 2022, something shifted behind palace walls. The duchy was not just land or wealth, it was power, control, and access to a vast financial network that had quietly supported people for years. For the first time, William had full authority over its income, contracts, and payroll. And as he began reviewing the details, one name stood out with unusual weight: Annabel Elliot, Queen Camilla's sister. For decades, Annabel had been part of the duchy's internal structure, receiving payments tied to interior design work across royal properties. Her presence was not hidden, but it had rarely been questioned. Her role dated back to 2005, shortly after King Charles married Camilla, and over time, it became normalized, almost invisible. To most observers, it looked like a professional arrangement, but to William, it represented something deeper, something rooted in history he had never forgotten. According to those familiar with the moment, William's reaction was immediate, yet controlled. There was no public statement, no formal announcement, and no attempt to soften the decision. Instead, the change appeared quietly in official records. After years of consistent payments, Annabel's name simply vanished from the duchy's financial report. No explanation followed. No acknowledgement was given. That silence was striking. In an institution built on tradition and careful messaging, even small changes are often managed with precision. Yet this decision unfolded without any visible transition. It was swift, clean, and deliberate. Palace sources later suggested it had nothing to do with performance or professional standards, but that explanation only deepened the mystery. If not her work, then what justified such a decisive move? For William, the answer may have been personal. Annabel was not just a contractor. She had long been part of Camilla's inner circle during one of the most controversial periods in royal history. Her connection to events surrounding his mother, Princess Diana, was well documented in past accounts. And while years had passed, the emotional weight of that history had not disappeared. From one perspective, this could be seen as a modernizing step. William has spoken about reshaping the monarchy, tightening financial structures, and ensuring that proximity to the crown does not automatically guarantee privilege. Removing long-standing arrangements could align with that vision. But from another angle, the decision feels more targeted, more symbolic, less about policy and more about drawing a line. What makes this moment particularly significant is not just the removal itself, but what it suggests. By cutting financial ties to someone so closely linked to Camilla, William may have been signaling a broader shift, one that extends beyond a single name on a payroll. It raises a larger question about influence, loyalty, and the future structure of royal support systems. Because if this were the first move, it may not be the last. What looked like a quiet dismissal hints at a more calculated plan. Was this a strategic warning shot, or the opening move in a deeper power shift, reshaping loyalties? If one connection could be severed so decisively, how many remain hidden, waiting to surface next? Let's unravel the truth. The hidden connections that resurface, old loyalties. Long before the financial ties were cut, the deeper reasons behind that decision had been quietly building, rooted in events that never truly disappeared. As Prince William reviewed the past, attention turned toward Annabel Elliot, not just as a designer tied to royal contracts, but as someone closely connected to one of the most painful chapters in his family's history. Her role, once overlooked or dismissed, began to take on a different weight when placed under closer scrutiny. During the years when King Charles and Camilla maintained their private relationship, Annabel's home in Dorset became more than just a countryside retreat. It was a place where the two could meet away from public view, shielded by familiarity and trust. These meetings were not random or distant from the inner circle. They happened within a space controlled by someone who understood exactly what was unfolding and allowed it to continue without interruption. Accounts from that time suggest that Annabelle was not simply a passive observer. She was present, aware, and at times actively supportive of the relationship. One widely discussed moment describes an evening when tensions were high and emotions were running deep. Instead of distancing herself, Annabelle is said to have encouraged Camilla to comfort Charles, reinforcing the bond between them at a time when Princess Diana was struggling behind closed doors. Whether seen as loyalty to her sister or something more deliberate, the impact of that involvement has remained deeply controversial. Even years later, long after the affair became public knowledge and its consequences had reshaped the royal family, Annabelle continued to defend Camilla openly. In a televised documentary celebrating the coronation of King Charles and Camilla, she spoke with confidence and warmth, describing her sister as loyal and supportive. The statement was delivered without hesitation, despite the history attached to those words. For many watching, it appeared as a firm stance. For others, it reopened questions that had never been fully settled. For William, these were not distant stories or abstract events. They were tied directly to his childhood, to memories shaped by confusion, loss, and unanswered questions. The idea that someone involved in those circumstances had continued to benefit financially from royal resources for nearly 2 decades may have felt difficult to ignore. It blurred the line between professional service and personal history in a way that could not easily be separated. Still, interpretation remains divided. Some view Annabelle's actions as those of a sister offering support within a complicated personal situation. Others see a more active role in enabling a relationship that causes lasting damage. The truth, as often happens in stories shaped by time and perspective, sits somewhere in between, influenced by both fact and interpretation. What is clear is that the past did not stay buried. As those details resurfaced, they added context to a decision that had initially seemed purely administrative. Instead, it began to look like part of something more deliberate, more personal. And in that shift, the quiet removal from a payroll transformed into something far more significant, an action tied not just to the present, but to a history that still carries weight. Beneath the surface of a routine decision, buried tensions reawaken, exposing motives that feel anything but procedural. As old connections resurface with unsettling precision, one question lingers. Was this merely administrative, or the calculated echo of a past powerful enough to reshape everything unfolding next? Stay glued. The ex-husband trigger. In early 2026, a familiar figure stepped back into public view, and with him came a wave of memories many believed had long been settled. Andrew Parker Bowles, once at the center of one of the most complex relationships in royal history, began appearing again at official events. His presence was quiet, almost understated, yet impossible to ignore. Photographs placed him alongside Camilla's children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, attending a military memorial and representing Princess Anne. On the surface, it seemed routine, but the timing raised questions. For decades, Andrew had remained a symbol of a past that shaped the present. His marriage to Queen Camilla had unfolded alongside her long-standing relationship with King Charles III. What made his reappearance striking was not just who he was, but what he represented. The history attached to him included an open marriage, overlapping relationships, and a social circle that quietly accommodated it all. These were not distant rumors, they were documented realities that had once dominated headlines and public debate. As images of Andrew circulated again, attention quickly shifted. Observers began connecting past events with present decisions. His calm, composed demeanor, standing beside family members, attending formal occasions without visible tension, sent a subtle but powerful message. It suggested acceptance, or at least the appearance of it. Over the years, his continued public loyalty had played a role in reshaping how the past was viewed. If the man most directly affected appeared at peace, it softened the narrative for many watching from the outside. Yet that same presence had another effect. It reopened conversations that had never fully disappeared. The dynamics of that earlier period, including the role of those who supported or enabled it, came back into focus. For some, Andrew's return did not signal closure, but rather a reminder of how complex and unresolved those relationships had been. It brought renewed attention to the network of individuals who had been involved, directly or indirectly, in maintaining the secrecy of that time. Within this context, Prince William's recent actions began to look different. What had first appeared to be an isolated financial decision, removing Annabel Elliot from the Duchy payroll, now seemed connected to a broader pattern. The timing, the silence, and the target all took on new meaning when viewed alongside Andrew's re-emergence. It raised the possibility that William's move was not simply administrative, but part of a deeper response to a history that had resurfaced in plain sight. Still, interpretation remains divided. Some see Andrew's presence as nothing more than a continuation of long-standing family ties, without deeper intention. Others believe it unintentionally exposed lingering tensions beneath the surface, forcing those within the royal circle to confront unresolved issues. The truth may lie somewhere between those perspectives. What cannot be ignored is the shift in perception. With Andrew Parker Bowles back in the public eye, the past no longer feels distant. It feels immediate, connected, and relevant. And in that renewed spotlight, William's actions no longer stand alone. They begin to look like the opening move in something far more deliberate. Suddenly, the narrative pivots as resurfacing figures blur the line between history and present power. Familiar faces re-enter with purpose, reframing decisions as calculated signals, not coincidence. If this is the first move, who is orchestrating the board, and what hidden structure is taking shape? Keep watching. The network that made it possible. As attention shifted from individual actions to the wider picture, a more complex structure began to emerge behind Queen Camilla's rise. It was not built in isolation. Instead, it was shaped by a tightly connected social circle that operated quietly but effectively during one of the most scrutinized periods in royal history. This network, composed of friends, allies, and influential figures within aristocratic society, played a subtle yet critical role in maintaining appearances while deeper realities unfolded out of public view. During the years of the relationship between King Charles III and Camilla, discretion was not just preferred, it was essential. Gatherings, private homes, and shared social spaces became controlled environments where questions were rarely asked. Individuals within this circle understood the importance of silence, and many appeared willing to protect that silence. It created a setting where the relationship could continue with minimal disruption, even as its consequences began to surface elsewhere. Among those connected to this environment was Andrew Parker Bowles. His role within the situation has long been a point of debate. As Camilla's husband at the time, his awareness of the relationship and his response to it carried significant weight. Accounts suggest that he did not openly challenge what was happening. Whether this was due to social pressure, personal choice, or the unique dynamics of royal hierarchy remains uncertain. What is clear is that his position contributed to the stability of the arrangement, allowing it to continue without direct confrontation. The broader social context also played a role. Aristocratic connections often function within a framework of mutual understanding, where reputation and discretion are closely guarded. In such an environment, maintaining appearances can take priority over exposing uncomfortable truths. This does not necessarily imply coordinated action, but it does highlight how a collective mindset can influence outcomes. Over time, that mindset helped shape how events were managed, perceived, and ultimately remembered. As years passed, the narrative surrounding Camilla began to shift. Public perception, once sharply critical, gradually softened. Appearances at official events, carefully managed media coverage, and visible support from key figures contributed to a slow transformation of her image. The presence of individuals like Andrew Parker Bowles at significant moments, remaining composed and publicly supportive, added to this change. It reinforced a sense of acceptance, suggesting that past conflicts had been resolved or at least set aside. However, this evolution has not been universally accepted. For some observers, the shift in perception raises questions about how much of it was organic and how much was influenced by long-standing connections. It invites scrutiny of the mechanisms that allow reputations to recover over time, especially within institutions built on tradition and continuity. In this light, Prince William's recent actions begin to take on a broader meaning. Removing a single individual from a financial structure may seem limited in scope, but within this context, it can be interpreted as a challenge to a system that has operated quietly for decades. It suggests a willingness to reassess not just present arrangements, but the foundations that allowed them to exist. And if that system is now being questioned, it raises a larger possibility that what once remained protected by silence may no longer be beyond reach. Seen from this angle, a calculated move quietly disrupts a long-protected structure, hinting at forces willing to rewrite its very foundation. But if one decision can expose what silence concealed for decades, how far does this unraveling go, and who stands to lose everything? Stay tuned. The moment that crossed the line. The tension that had been building behind palace doors became impossible to ignore when the focus shifted to Catherine, Princess of Wales. For Prince William, this was no longer about history alone. It was about the present, and the one person he was known to protect without hesitation. Those close to him had long understood that, while he could tolerate pressure, criticism, and even personal strain, there was a clear boundary when it came to his wife. And slowly, that boundary appeared to be tested. The situation had been developing through a series of public narratives, particularly those involving Meghan Markle. Reports circulated suggesting that Meghan had made Kate cry during preparations for a royal wedding, a claim later disputed by both Meghan and Prince Harry. Despite the denials, the story gained global attention, shaping public perception and placing Kate at the center of a controversy she had not directly addressed. Within royal circles, it was widely believed that such narratives did not emerge without influence, raising questions about who benefited from their spread. For William, this was not an isolated incident. It echoed patterns he had witnessed before, where information was used strategically and reputations were affected in subtle but lasting ways. The idea that similar tactics could be directed toward Kate carried a different weight. It was no longer a distant memory tied to his mother's experience. It was unfolding in real time, with visible consequences. The situation escalated further during a highly publicized state visit at Windsor Castle. As world leaders gathered, cameras captured every interaction, every gesture, every movement. In one moment that quickly drew attention, Queen Camilla made a brief but noticeable gesture toward Kate, signaling her to step aside during a conversation. Kate complied without hesitation, maintaining composure in front of an international audience. To many watching, it seemed minor, even routine. But within the context of royal protocol, where every action is deliberate, it stood out. Observers noted the subtlety of the exchange, but also its impact. For William, who witnessed the moment, it reportedly reinforced concerns that had been building over time. A source later described his reaction as one of quiet frustration, suggesting that the gesture, though small, carried symbolic meaning. In a setting defined by hierarchy and respect, even a slight deviation can signal deeper tension. This moment also highlighted a growing divide between William and King Charles III. Reports indicate that William had previously raised concerns directly, questioning how such situations were allowed to develop. The response he received did not resolve those concerns. Instead, it appeared to deepen the sense of disconnect, reflecting a familiar pattern where perspectives within the family did not align. Interpretation of these events remains divided. Some view them as routine interactions amplified by public scrutiny, while others see a continuation of long-standing dynamics within the royal structure. What cannot be ignored is the shift in tone. The issue had moved from historical grievances to present-day actions, creating a more immediate and personal conflict. And in that shift, the stakes changed. What had once been managed quietly now carried visible consequences, suggesting that the line William had drawn was no longer theoretical. It had been crossed, and the response to that moment was still unfolding. In that turning point, everything recalibrated. A boundary, once symbolic, suddenly triggered real consequences, unfolding in ways no one could fully control. But if that line was deliberately crossed, Was it provocation or strategy? And what hidden move was already reshaping the future behind the scenes? Stay with us. A quiet move to secure the future. As pressure around the royal household intensified, a quiet but significant decision began to draw attention. Queen Camilla made a legal move that, on the surface, appeared routine. She transferred ownership of her private residence, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. The property, purchased in 1996 following her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles, had long been described as her personal sanctuary, a place separate from royal duties and public life. Yet the timing of this transfer raised immediate questions. In many cases, such decisions are explained as standard estate planning. Camilla, in her late 70s, and King Charles III, facing ongoing health concerns, would naturally consider the future of their assets. Passing property to the next generation is neither unusual nor unexpected. However, this particular move did not occur in isolation. It followed closely after Prince William's decision to remove Annabel Elliot from the Duchy payroll, a move that had already signaled a shift in how financial ties connected to the monarchy might be handled moving forward. The connection between these events became difficult to ignore. William now controls the Duchy of Cornwall and is widely expected to inherit full authority over royal funding structures when he becomes king. That includes influence over the sovereign grant, the financial mechanism that supports senior members of the royal family. Camilla's position, while secure under Charles, becomes less certain under William's future reign. In that context, transferring ownership of a privately held property could be seen as a way to place it beyond any potential restructuring. Mill House is more than just an asset. It represents independence, privacy, and security. By moving it into her children's names, Camilla ensured that it would remain outside direct royal control, regardless of future changes within the institution. Legally, the decision creates a layer of separation that could limit external influence. Whether this was the primary intention or simply a precaution remains open to interpretation, but the effect is clear. At the same time, subtle signs of distance within her own family began to surface. Reports indicated that during the 2025 holiday season, Camilla personally invited her son to join her at Sandringham. The response, made public soon after, suggested a different approach. Tom declined, choosing instead to spend the holiday elsewhere, with plans that did not align with royal tradition. The decision was not dramatic, but it was noticeable. It hinted at a degree of separation that had not been widely discussed before. Taken together, these developments suggest a shift in positioning. Camilla, who had spent decades navigating complex relationships and public perception, now appeared to be preparing for a different phase. Some view these actions as careful planning in response to changing circumstances. Others see them as evidence of growing uncertainty about her standing within the evolving structure of the monarchy. What remains unclear is how these moves will be interpreted in the long term. They could represent caution, strategy, or simply coincidence, but within the broader narrative, they signal something important. The balance of control may be shifting, and those who once operated with confidence may now be adjusting to a future that feels far less certain. Something subtle has begun to change, and its consequences may be far greater than anyone anticipated. Are these calculated moves a sign of quiet strategy, or the early tremors of a deeper power shift that could redefine control and leave once dominant figures scrambling to adapt? Let's find out. The power shift. No one can ignore. As the final pieces begin to fall into place, a broader picture starts to emerge, one that goes far beyond individual decisions or isolated tensions. At the center of it stands Prince William, no longer in a position of quiet observation, but increasingly seen as someone shaping the future direction of the monarchy. His recent actions, though subtle on the surface, suggest a deliberate shift toward a more controlled and streamlined institution. For years, William has spoken about the need for a leaner monarchy, one that operates with clearer boundaries and greater accountability. This vision involves reducing unnecessary financial ties, limiting the influence of extended networks, and ensuring that royal resources are used with purpose. While these ideas have been discussed publicly in general terms, their practical implementation is now becoming visible. The removal of long-standing financial connections and the reassessment of who benefits from royal association are early indicators of that approach. Within this evolving framework, the position of Queen Camilla appears increasingly uncertain. Her influence, once strengthened by proximity to King Charles III, is tied closely to his reign. As long as Charles remains king, the existing structure holds. But the moment that changes, control over key financial mechanisms, including the sovereign grant, shifts to William. That transition carries significant implications, not only for institutional priorities, but also for individuals whose roles depend on the current system. This reality has not gone unnoticed. Observers have pointed to subtle changes in behavior, both public and private, that suggest an awareness of what may come next. Camilla's recent decisions, including the transfer of personal assets, can be viewed through this lens, as preparations for a future where her position is no longer central. Whether these actions are precautionary or strategic, they reflect a growing recognition that the balance of power is shifting. At the same time, William's approach reveals a notable transformation. In earlier years, he was often described as patient and restrained, someone who carried personal history without openly acting on it. Now, there are signs of a different posture, one that combines that same control with a willingness to make decisive changes when necessary. His actions are not loud or publicly confrontational, but they are precise, and their impact is difficult to overlook. Interpretation of this shift varies. Some see it as a natural evolution of leadership, a necessary step in modernizing an institution that must adapt to changing expectations. Others view it as more personal, shaped by past experiences that continue to influence present decisions. The truth likely includes elements of both, blending institutional reform with individual perspective. What is clear is that the current moment feels like the beginning of something larger. The decisions being made now are not isolated. They connect to a broader strategy that may redefine how the monarchy functions in the years ahead. And within that unfolding process, the roles, relationships, and structures that once seemed fixed are starting to move. The story at this stage is not reaching an end. Instead, it is entering a new phase, one where each decision carries wider consequences. And as those consequences continue to unfold, the direction of that change remains the question no one can yet fully answer. So, what do you think? Was Prince William protecting the monarchy or settling personal scores after that bombshell revelation? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.